This is a story about putting yourself willfully in harm's way. My friend Matt is a lawyer by trade, but in his heart he's a short story writer. And for evidence of this, all you have to do is look at his left arm, which is covered in tattoos, and they're all tributes to his favorite writers, guys like Poe, Shakespeare, Whitman. And nestled among them is the black silhouette of a bull. And when I asked him about this, he said, "Oh yeah, I was in Pamplona for the running of the bulls." You ran? I mean, Matt's a trim guy, but he's not exactly athletic. Well, you know, I was there. What? I mean, what about the bulls, man? But you see, that silhouette of the bull is not just about Pamplona. It's also a tribute to another of his favorite writers, Ernest Hemingway, and his book, The Sun Also Rises. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but in it, Jake Barnes is Hemingway's prototypical broken man. He's received a war wound that's made him impotent, and perhaps to compensate, he goes to Paris with some buddies and takes a train down to Pamplona, Spain, for the 7-day Fiesta de San Fermin. And from there, it's a total debacle from a certain point of view. There's binge drinking, womanizing, fist fights, bull running, the sort of thing that makes a DC lawyer and his sissy friends kind of feel a little weak-kneed and inadequate. And I think maybe that's why when Matt turned 30 and was just starting to write more, that he grabbed a couple of buddies and they went to recreate the Jake Barnes experience. Their mission was to find their cojones. So when they first arrived there, they wanted to see just how dangerous it was, so they went down to the bull route right away to assess the risk. And they stood on the other side of these fences that lined the routes, and what they discovered is that there's an ethic to the running of the bulls. Now you or I might think of it as running from the bulls, but the locals see it a little differently. To them, it's running with the bulls. So if a runner tries to prematurely hop the fence or duck underneath, there are volunteers who line the route with pugil sticks and oversized boxing gloves, and they'll beat you back onto the course. It's the only sporting thing to do, I guess, but when Matt saw that, he thought, those sick bastards. And it was the kind of thing, frankly, that Jonathan Franzen would say, not Papa Hemingway. And after the bulls ran on by, medics rushed onto the cobblestones to treat the wounded. Men were slumped over, bleeding. It looked like a Civil War field hospital. Okay. Matt and Dan, that was his main friend on this trip, coped in the only way they knew how. They started binge drinking themselves. And they drank wine from these leather sacks called bota bags. And at one point, a bartender said, "Bravistas, no, that's not how you do it. Let me show you how." And so he grabbed the bota bag and held it at arm's length and showed them how to squeeze wine into their mouths. "Bravistas?" Matt said. "Yes, the little brave ones who run with the bulls." "Have you ever run with the bulls?" "Ha, no, it's suicide." "More wine?" So Matt and Dan knew when to take advice, and they drank their faces off that night. And they danced and packed bar after packed bar after packed bar. They were hoisted onto people's shoulders and carried out into the streets where they partied some more. Matt just might have hooked up with a girl, just like Hemingway. I mean, these sissies were really turning things around. So much so that that night Dan said, "I think we can outrun those bulls." And so it was decided. Tomorrow they would run. But that night, Matt had a dream, a very bad dream. You see, bulls can run 12 miles an hour, but humans, not quite so fast. And so the next morning, when he heard the knocking on his door to rise and shine, he pulled the covers over his head. And when he heard his telephone ring by his bedside, he covered his ears. Then he ignored further knocking and further phone calls. Until finally he heard, "Matt, are you okay? Are you in there?" And then he heard a key turn, and his door creaked open. And as the light filled his room, he sat up. "Matt, get your ass out of bed. We gotta be down in the plaza at 6:30. "All right," he said. And so he slinked out of bed and slowly put on the red and white traditional garb of a runner. And then he added, I think I'm going to sit this one out. And then the weight of Hemingway's disapproval filled the silence that followed. Well, can you at least follow me down to the plaza? Oh, sure. But since there's an ethic to the running of the bulls, once you're in the plaza, you're in the plaza. The only way out is to run the half mile from the start line to the Coliseum and hope that the 6 steers escorting the 6 bulls keep those bulls in line. And really, when you think about it, the steers, the ones without the balls, they're kind of like the lawyers of the race course. And Matt wasn't sure that he trusted them. Even more disturbing, there were no locals in that plaza, only English speakers. You know, kind of like old guys hanging on for one last hurrah, midlife crisis types. And then Matt heard a disturbing cascade of greeting. Good day, mate. Good day, mate. Good day, mate. Australians. Anything involving them was inherently stupid. This plaza was the on-ramp to the highway to hell. Now, at 8 o'clock, they shoot off a rocket, and they let the bulls free. But at 7:45, they release the humans. And this is so they can go find a safe place in which to cower along the course. And so, of course, Matt and Dan went their separate ways. I think Papa Hemingway would have approved. It was a classic case of man versus beast. And as the clocks on the course ticked ever closer to 8 o'clock, the volunteers removed gates on the roadway. Each one was closer and closer to the Coliseum. And at 7:59, they removed the last gate, and Matt finally was free to run. And he started off at kind of a leisurely pace, but then he remembered his dream. In it, Dan was gored by 2 bulls simultaneously, torn apart at the waist. Blood splattered Japanese tourists in Disney princess outfits. This inspired him to run a little faster, and before long he was down the chute and onto the sandy floor of the Coliseum, where he was surrounded by 30 other terrified men. Matt is looking around, looking for any way out. He sees what appears to be a gate, and he runs over there, and he's like, "Let me out!" But the person manning the gate shakes his head no, and the crowd is going, "Boo! Boo!" So he goes to another gate, and another. For the love of Christ, let me out of here. And finally, some guard lets him pass. Boo! Before long, Dan has joined them, and they're safe behind this little human paddock. And at that point, they look up at the big screen televising the event, and they see the rocket go off. And the bulls are released from their pen. Boo! And Matt and Dan look at each other. No way. And then they're pelted with bags of urine and sangria. And then just to rub it in, the crowd goes, boo, once more. It was the kind of thing that would happen in a Jonathan Franzen novel. Now that night, Matt and Dan got together, and they decided they were going to tell their friends back home about this experience. Those bulls were nipping at our heels. Oh yeah, we came within inches of our life. And I think if Papa Hemingway had seen this, he might have asked for his copy of The Sun Also Rises back. But either way, I don't think Matt would have really cared. It took a lot of courage just to get out there, no matter the head start. And anyway, he was no Jake Barnes. I mean, the impotence he felt was the impotence we all feel. Those are little stick figures in a sometimes indifferent world. And so I think that's why today his little silhouette of the bull on his arm is obscured by all the others. Matt's a writer just like Hemingway, but he's the furthest thing possible from a broken man. Thank you.